What is up, everyone? Crunchy Frog here, and WarZone launched as a free-to-play Battle Royale experience in March of 2020. When the mode first launched, no one could have really known how successful it would go on to become. WarZone 1 spanned 3 Call of Duty titles, including Cold War and Vanguard, and has helped grow the Call of Duty franchise to the largest it has ever been. With record sales numbers and insane monthly player counts, have undoubtedly planted the seed in the minds of Activision leadership that Warzone should be the future of Call of Duty. I mean, let's face it, because of Warzone, COD is making now more money than it ever has, and because the game is free to play, more people than ever are able to jump into a Call of Duty experience straight from their dashboard without paying any money. And with games like PUBG and Fortnite becoming absolute cash cows for their respective publishers, it makes sense that Activision would want a slice of that Battle Royale pie as well. Now, many have talked about how Warzone has, quote-unquote, saved the franchise, or how Warzone is the best thing to ever happen to Call of Duty, but today, let's reflect on some of the negatives that Warzone may spell for this series going forward. As always, if you enjoy this kind of content, leave a like rating, as it really helps the channel, and as always, slam that subscribe button if you want to see more COD content just like this every week. So we'll get right into it. Let me first start out by saying that over the years, I actually have really enjoyed Warzone as a whole. It's been frustrating at times and definitely unfulfilling, but the game mode is well executed and provided a wonderful way for me to play with friends in new and engaging ways with a lot more cooperative possibilities. In the spring of 2020, back when Warzone originally launched, there was not much for everyone to do besides kind of stay at home and play games. The world was thrown into lockdowns and quarantines and everything, and everyone had to stay inside, so Warzone provided a great way for me to reconnect with a lot of my friends, and millions of others did the same, basically just getting into the game and spending all of our nights and weekends grinding for wins in Verdansk. Now, I've grown weary of the mode as of late, and I could probably rant for an entire video about all the issues plaguing Warzone lately and just why it's not fun for me, but overall, I am still very excited to see how Warzone 2 changes the game as it evolves throughout Modern Warfare 2's life cycle. A brand new experience built from the ground up should be much better than its predecessor. However, one look at the pre-release marketing will tell you that while multiplayer is still what COD is known for, Warzone is definitely the top dog now in Activision's eyes. Dozens of blog posts hyping up Warzone 2.0 and all of its new features. It has birthed an entire half of the Call of Duty Next event was dedicated to Warzone, and the release date was well published and well marketed for Warzone 2.0, almost treating it like an entirely new game release, right? You always heard the release date for Modern Warfare 2 and the release date for Warzone 2 kind of said back to back. They didn't let one breathe without the other. Before Modern Warfare 2 even hit shelves, Infinity Ward was already busy advertising the release date, like we said. They set up the release of this year's COD in a distinct three-phase design, with campaign would launch kind of a week early, so to speak, ahead of multiplayer to build hype and give players a small taste of the game, get reviews going, stuff like that. Multiplayer would then obviously drop 8 days later on the 28th, but most importantly, it seemed like it was all just building up to the November 16th release date for Warzone 2.0, along with the new DMZ mode that would come with the Season 1 content drop. Multiplayer was given a meager 2.5 weeks of runtime in the wild before Warzone dropped. Less than 3 weeks after the game came out, and already millions of players will be leaving the multiplayer playlists in droves. Before official dates were revealed, months ahead of release, several members of the community theorized that Infinity Ward would actually hold the release of Warzone 2.0 until, at the very least, the beginning of 2023, in order to let the multiplayer experience breathe. And, well, we turned out to be very wrong. The tight release window also seems to feed into the next point. The Call of Duty multiplayer is now just a glorified way to level up guns and unlock camos to then use or show off in Warzone. Even in a pre-release blog post detailing what to do in Call of Duty multiplayer and what to spend your time on, they mentioned leveling up guns and unlocking attachments just so you can use them in Warzone. The not quite 3-week window is just enough time to establish the meta weapons and establish what guns are good, and for people to level up those specific weapons to max level so that all the meta attachment combinations were available to them by the time the Warzone 2 comes around. And while loadout drops aren't as big of a player in Warzone 2.0 as they have been in the previous iteration, they're still a massive part of the game, and players will want to have the best options available in their loadout drops once they do get them. This is not a new phenomenon, however, as the Warzone faithful in the community have been openly admitting that traditional 6v6 is just a way for them to level their guns up since basically early on in Warzone's lifespan back in 2020. When new weapons would launch with seasonal content drops in Modern Warfare 2019, content creators and hardcore Warzone enthusiasts would hop into multiplayer, grind the weapons for no other real reason than just to get those now new meta weapons maxed out with all the best attachments so they could dominate gunfights in Warzone. They weren't playing multiplayer for the sake of playing the 6v6 experience. They just wanted an easy path for gun XP. And so as soon as guns were leveled, they would ditch multiplayer again and hop back into Warzone. One look at the content offering for Season 1 of Modern Warfare 2 will show you that the devs are not that interested in investing in the 6v6 experience. For the first time in recent memory, no new or original maps for multiplayer were released, or at least none have been announced as of the time of this recording. Whether or not they have one squirreled away, we don't know. Only 2 maps are scheduled for Season 1, and both are reskins of maps from previous games. Even worse, they just so happen to both be gun leveling maps, which further leads to the idea that multiplayer will only be used as a way to level weapons for Warzone. And this already compounds the already low 6v6 map offering this year, as there are now, as of the start of Season 1, only 11 multiplayer maps, with one of them just being a reskin. Future seasons could be proved to be different, however, and after all, Season 1 was mainly focused around the launches of the DMZ beta and Warzone 2.0. Therefore, we have to assume that most of the immediate post-launch development was probably routed to focus on getting those two ready to launch and launch in a relatively bug-free state. Pair that with a huge amount of bug fixes and performance improvements that have had to be made since Modern Warfare 2's launch that aren't even quite done yet. And it's easy to write off Season 1's poor map offering as just, not enough time and resources this time around. However, it does set a pretty poor precedent for what we'll have going forward. Despite the devs not having to release a full-on game mode in upcoming seasons like they had to for Season 1, they will still undoubtedly be releasing Warzone map updates, point of interest updates, limited time modes and events, bug fixes and balance fixes that will still tie up resources that would usually be dedicated just to creating more multiplayer content or more multiplayer focused patches. We saw this exact same thing happen last year with Vanguard. Since Vanguard did not sell well and was not well received by the community, COD really tried to double down and sell on the Warzone experience. This led to each seasonal update being centered around and marketed around either a massive Warzone edition or a limited time mode that they had cooked up for Warzone, and usually centered around Warzone itself, with multiplayer kind of taking a backseat. The multiplayer aspect wasn't completely abandoned by any means. We still got maps here and there, but slowly with each season, COD devs spent more and more resources on Warzone content and marketing the new Warzone modes and events, and less on multiplayer. Even Vanguard's launch as a whole was hyped up mainly for what it would eventually add to Warzone in the form of the brand new map Caldera. I worry that this may have signaled the opening of a Pandora's box of sorts, with Warzone filling the vacuum that was created by the lackluster Vanguard multiplayer experience. Essentially, not enough people were playing Vanguard multiplayer. It wasn't as hyped up as a usual COD release, and so in order to fill that void and still make money, they just really pushed Warzone, to be that Call of Duty experience. Now, some of the Warzone players may come to expect that exact same amount of content and developer attention when it comes to Warzone 2 and its updates. I would have to imagine for a series that consistently makes enough money that, more than the GDP of some entire nations year after year for the last 15 plus years, that there should be enough development resources to account for both Warzone content and multiplayer content. But recent offerings have kind of dictated otherwise. Furthermore, COD may be spreading itself way too thin, as we've seen with spin-off modes such as Ground War, Champions Hill, Arms Race, and Spec Ops having support seemingly dropped out of nowhere, either with no post-launch support or just 1 or 2 offerings and then getting cut off entirely. Perhaps having so many modes and offshoots is too much for these teams to keep up with. In a perfect world, we'd see all these modes receive the attention they deserve on top of multiplayer and Warzone content, but that's usually not the case, right? I could make an entire video talking about my thoughts on the amount of content we've started getting from seasonal drops, but for now, I'll just leave it at I wish more modes got some love along the way. Champions Hill honestly was one of the most unfortunate of the aforementioned casualties, as the mode had great promise and was very fun, but ultimately never even got a single map or, to my knowledge, a sizable update post-launch. And all of this is to say, I just hope the multiplayer doesn't find itself on this same list in the future, as a mode that just slowly gets pushed to the back burner and forgotten about, eventually losing support entirely as new modes such as DMZ and WarZone begin to get all of the attention and dev time going forward. Now, luckily, Modern Warfare 2 will be a 2-year release, meaning we have 2 full years of updates and seasonal content drops, adding maps and guns to the game, as well as a rumored paid expansion next fall. But, myself personally, I'm just really enjoying the standard 6v6 multiplayer. The much refined progression system has me hooked, and the gunplay is arguably the best it's ever been. But Warzone, on the other hand, well, to be frank, I'm just kind of Warzoned out. I've tried to play a few games of Warzone 2, especially on stream and stuff like that, but myself and the group I play with just aren't enjoying it. It's a great offering, don't get me wrong, but just something that I'm tired of. I've done it too much over the last 3 years, and I haven't really been focusing on multiplayer as much as I'd like to. So, Modern Warfare 2's multiplayer has me kind of wanting to dive back in headfirst to the 6v6 gameplay experience. Grinding camos, leveling up, leveling guns up, going for streaks, focusing on my gameplay, and most importantly, just having a good time, something that Warzone is lacking, sadly, anymore. So I hope that the devs kind of see this positive feedback, especially from other content creators such as Nero and Blame Truth and a couple other guys I watch. I know they have all been commenting the same, that this is a great year for them. They're actually enjoying the game to some extent. And so I hope the devs see this positive feedback again and make a conscious decision to actually fully support it. Since it's not in the same category as Vanguard last year, right? The game doesn't suck, surprisingly, so, I hope they don't kick multiplayer to the side again because they don't really need to, right? Hopefully it's selling well enough and enough people are playing multiplayer that it keeps their attention. And I hope the multiplayer ultimately doesn't fall to the wayside as Warzone continues its steady march towards being COD's teacher's pet. Overall, I recognize the Warzone is massively profitable for Activision, and since it's free to play, it arguably brings in the most new players to the franchise, but the identity of Call of Duty is still tied to the standard 6v6 multiplayer. Core multiplayer is still the reason why a vast majority of gamers buy Call of Duty year in and year out, and as such, it just simply cannot be left to the wayside like it's seeming to be done. As a multiplayer fan myself, I have noticed a steady decline in support and attention, and especially new content for the multiplayer side of the game ever since Warzone first released back in 2020. Less and less content has been releasing for the standard multiplayer, and Warzone has begun to take center stage, both in terms of content offerings and marketing for the game. Ultimately, time will tell if the trend continues, but I'm hoping that in the end, multiplayer prevails and we get back to getting some great DLC offerings for multiplayer as well as live events, right? Bring back live events. I miss the Shamrock and all that stuff like that. But as always, guys, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this situation. Are you okay with a shift away from multiplayer to more Warzone content? What would you like to see Infinity Ward and other devs put more effort into in the future? Let me know in the comments section below. And also be sure you're subscribed with notifications on to stay up to date with all things Modern Warfare 2 here on the channel. I make sure to post weekly commentaries or discussions, kind of like this video. Some are short, some are, more long-form discussions, as well as news and update breakdowns as they release. So definitely stop by and make sure you're keeping up with all of the news. So once again, thanks everyone for stopping by, and you have a great day.